You don't really think about dying until the moment it feels certain. For me, that moment came in Tab Valley, Afghanistan, 2013. I remember the dust first. It was everywhere. Clinging to my skin, my gear, settling into the creases of my hands like fine powder that didn't want to let go. Even the inside of my mouth tasted like dirt and old copper. The sun hadn't even cleared the ridge yet, but the air already felt like it was vibrating, thick with something we all felt but couldn't name. We'd landed hours earlier. 3 Chinooks touching down hard, their rotors kicking up a storm of sand and poppy petals. The plan was simple on paper. Insert northwest of the valley, split into 3 elements, push down, establish battle positions, and draw the enemy out. Intelligence had given us numbers. 300 enemy fighters, maybe 800 if the reports were right. But after years in this war, I knew better than to trust numbers. And I knew better than to trust plans. By the time we fought our way into that village, everything about the mission had already changed. The poppy fields had slowed us down more than expected. The mud walls turned the place into a maze we hadn't seen coming. The compounds we planned to use as strongholds? Useless. Not defensible. We consolidated into 2 positions instead of 3. Improvised. Told ourselves we'd figure it out when the sun came up. But the enemy didn't wait for sunrise. The first grenade hit our courtyard while I was flat on my back grabbing 10 minutes of sleep. The blast woke me like a punch to the chest. If that thing hadn't been a dud, half my team would have gone down before breakfast. The next few minutes turned into a blur of RPGs, small arms fire, and shouted commands. My captain, taking rounds on the rooftop, barely stayed conscious long enough to return fire. We fought back hard, pushed them off, temporarily. But the worst was still coming. I was crouched behind a crumbling wall when the radio crackled with the one word no leader ever wants to hear in combat. Casualty. One of our Afghan commandos, shot. That. Dropped in an alley right between 2 PKM machine gun positions. Open ground. No cover. No air support. The Apaches overhead were out of ammo, or worse, guns malfunctioning. I remember crouching there, breathing hard, staring at that alley. I could see the guy. Could literally see him, laying there in the dirt, bleeding out, dragging one useless leg like he was trying to crawl but couldn't. And I knew. If we waited, he'd die. If we left him, the Taliban would drag his body away, or worse. But if we went out there, it wouldn't be a rescue. It would be a fight for survival with odds I didn't like. I glanced back at my guys. I didn't need to give an order. They already knew. That's the thing people don't tell you about moments like this. There's no dramatic music, no slow-motion cinematics, just a quiet, private thought that says, this might be it. And then you go. You don't go because you're fearless. You go because leaving a man behind was never an option. I stood up, tightened my sling, checked my mags, and took the first step. Tab Valley wasn't like the other places we'd fought. You hear the word valley and maybe you imagine something wide, open, maybe even peaceful. But Tab was a trap disguised as terrain. Twisting alleys, mud brick compounds stacked like broken teeth along the slopes, and poppy fields thick enough to choke a convoy. Every corner was a blind spot. Every rooftop a potential firing position. The locals knew the land like it was stitched into their skin. We were visitors. Armed and trained, sure. but still visitors. Our team? Mostly Green Berets, with a small element of Afghan commandos attached. About 24 Afghans to every 2 Americans. That was the ratio. Always was. Our job was to advise, assist, and when needed, lead from the front. And in Tab Valley, we were needed. We'd flown in pre-dawn. 3 CH-47 Chinooks dumping us into the northwest end of the valley. We hit the ground, spread out, took up positions fast. The Afghan commandos moved with determination, but you could see it in their eyes. Most of them were fighting for a paycheck, not for country. Didn't mean they weren't brave. Just meant their reasons were different. Our captain, young, smart, but still green in his own way, was in charge of C2, our command and control element. He'd set up on a rooftop, eyes glued to the feed from the drones overhead, trying to track enemy movement. I led Assault Force 2. Supporting effort, but still frontline when things got messy. And things always got messy. We'd been running ops together for months, and my team, they were tight. Solid. We weren't flashy. We didn't yell. We moved with intent, communicated with looks, half sentences, muscle memory. Guys like Dorsey, my Bravo, sharp as hell with a rifle and had a sixth sense for spotting IEDs. Alvarez, our medic, always carried a half smile like he knew a joke you didn't. Singh, our communications guy, quiet but fast with his hands when it mattered. There were more, of course, each one with their own story. Their own scars. By the time we reached our intended battle positions that morning, sweat was already soaking through our gear. The sun was climbing, turning the air into liquid heat. The poppy fields had slowed us down more than we liked. And worse, the compounds we'd planned to use for defense were barely more than crumbling walls with no fields of fire. Still, we adapted. We pulled the 2 assault elements closer, positioning the C2 section with us. The plan was to wait for first light, get the drones up, reassess, and then clear known enemy compounds nearby. I told the team to catch what rest they could. 30 minutes maybe. Enough to reset. I laid down in a shadowed corner of our compound, helmet still on, rifle within arm's reach. I closed my eyes, letting muscle fatigue pull me under. It lasted 10 minutes. The next thing I knew, there were 3 guys on top of me yelling, "They're in the courtyard." Grenade blasts rocked the compound walls. Dust and debris filled the air. Somewhere above me, I heard the captain scream as an RPG detonated near his position. Another grenade landed inside the courtyard, thankfully a dud, or most of us wouldn't have been getting up. The enemy was closer than they had any right to be. That's the thing about Tab Valley. It didn't care about your intel. It didn't care about your training. It existed to remind you, the enemy always gets a vote. And they just voted. Hard? The next hour became a blur of shifting fire, repositioning and pushing back, wave after wave. And that's when the casualty call came over the radio. One of our Afghan commandos, wounded and exposed in the kill zone. I took a deep breath, checked my rifle, looked at my team, and stepped toward the alley where everything was about to change. I stood at the corner of the wall, staring down that narrow alley. The dust hadn't even settled from the last barrage. The air smelled like spent gunpowder, diesel, and sweat. Somewhere across that open space, maybe 20 meters away, our Afghan commando lay motionless in the dirt. His leg was twisted under him at an angle that told me everything I needed to know about the wound. Blood had already darkened the sand beneath him. But it wasn't the blood that held me in place. It was the 2 PKM machine guns covering that alley, one to the left, one to the right, perfect interlocking fields of fire. If we moved out there without cover, we'd get shredded before making it halfway. I ducked back behind the wall, cursing under my breath. Alvarez, our medic, knelt beside me, eyes wide but focused. "He's still moving," he said, voice low. "Barely." Dorsey checked the angle with his optics. "They've got both ends locked. There's no lane." Our Apaches were circling overhead, but radio comms were coming back with the worst news possible. Both their cannons were down. One had a bent barrel. The other malfunctioned after the first burst. No air support. No indirect fire. No drones. No artillery. Just us. "Call for 30 Mike," Dorsey suggested, half hopeful. "Already tried," Singh said from behind a shattered doorway. "Rounds inbound, but it'll be at least 2 mics before they hit." 2 minutes. Our guy didn't have 2 minutes. I pulled back from the wall and looked at my team. These were men I'd trained with, bled with. Men who trusted me to make the kind of decisions that got people home. Or didn't. Part of me wanted to wait. Part of me wanted to believe the Apaches would somehow fix their guns. That the enemy would pause. That some tactical miracle would drop from the sky. But deep down, I knew better. If we left him out there, he wouldn't just bleed out. They'd grab him, drag him off, use him as propaganda. Or worse, dying was one thing. Being left, that was another. I took a breath. The kind of breath you take when you've already made the decision, but need one last second to square it with yourself. "We're going," I said finally. Alvarez's head snapped up. Dorsey's eyes narrowed. Singh swore under his breath. I didn't give anyone a chance to argue. "Dorsey, you take the right." Singh, left suppression. "Alvarez, you're on me. Grab your aid bag and stay low." I chambered a fresh round, slammed my shoulder against the wall, feeling the heat of adrenaline flood through my limbs. The alley hadn't changed. The PKMs hadn't stopped. The odds hadn't improved. But we were going anyway. Because in moments like this, it wasn't about winning. It wasn't about strategy. It was about one thing. We don't leave our own. The first step out into that alley felt like crossing a wire with no net below. Dorsey opened up first, short, controlled bursts toward the left side PKM position. His rounds kicked up dust and splinters along the mud brick wall, giving us a 2-second window to move. "Go," I barked. Alvarez and I sprinted low, feet pounding dirt, closing the distance to the fallen commando. Rounds zipped past, one close enough that I felt the hot sting of air peel across my cheek. I dropped to one knee beside the injured soldier. His eyes were wide, pupils blown with fear, mouth open like he was trying to speak but couldn't get enough air. Blood poured from a torn-up thigh, and 3 of his fingers were gone, clean, sheared off. "Alvarez, tourniquet," I shouted. Alvarez was already there, kneeling beside me, hands working fast, sliding the strap high and tight above the wound, cinching it until the bleeding slowed. Another burst from the PKM ripped into the wall behind us, spraying mud and debris. I ducked instinctively, shielding both Alvarez and the wounded man with my own body. We've got maybe 30 seconds before they reload or reposition. Singh called out over the radio, voice strained but clear. Dorsey kept firing, switching angles, keeping their heads down, but he couldn't hold them forever. From the corner of my eye, I saw 2 enemy fighters bounding along the opposite alley, flanking us. Textbook movement. One laid down suppressive fire while the other sprinted forward. "Left flank," I yelled. Before Singh could react, I swung my rifle, squeezing off 3 quick shots. One round dropped the lead fighter. The second man hesitated just long enough for Dorsey to adjust and finish the job. For a half second, I thought, we're doing it. We're gonna pull this off? Then the third PKM opened up, from a position none of us had seen. The rounds raked the alley just behind us. Dirt exploded at our feet. The next impact hit me square in the right leg. It felt like getting tackled by a truck. I dropped hard, my knee giving out beneath me, breath knocked from my lungs. Alvarez grabbed my vest, dragging me back behind what little cover there was, a shallow depression near a collapsed section of wall. "Stay with me," he shouted, voice already shifting from teammate to medic mode. I tried to move, to roll over and return fire, but my leg wasn't cooperating. Pain exploded down my thigh and hip, followed by a hot, spreading numbness. Before I could fully process it, a second impact slammed into my upper back, just below my shoulder blade. This one took everything. My left arm went dead instantly, dropping uselessly at my side. My vision blurred at the edges, my hearing turned hollow, like I was listening through a tin can. I knew exactly what had happened. Brachial nerve. And probably the artery, too. Somewhere behind the haze of pain, I heard Singh screaming for suppression. Dorsey was shouting positions. Alvarez was on me, ripping open his aid bag, pressing bandages into the wound on my back, muttering curses between rapid breaths. I wanted to tell him to focus on the commando first. I wanted to tell him I was fine. I wanted to help. But all I could do was stay conscious. My mind flashed through images like broken film strips. The inside of the Chinook that morning. My team laughing before wheels up. The poppy fields. The first step into the alley. And now, Zulu is down. Urgent. Repeat. Zulu is urgent. Singh's voice cut through the chaos, sending the call out on every net frequency we had. I could feel Alvarez packing the wound tighter, hear him talking to me, his words sharp and repetitive, designed to keep me awake. Stay with me, you're not checking out, man, stay with me. Somewhere overhead, I heard the distant roar of A-10s inbound. The ground shuddered from a strafing run a few hundred meters out. Close. Not close enough? The enemy wasn't letting up. Rounds still smacked into the dirt nearby. The smell of gunpowder burned my throat. The world shrank down to one simple mission: breathe. Stay conscious. Stay alive. Alvarez grabbed my helmet, forced my gaze toward him. You hear me? You stay here. You're not leaving this alley. I blinked hard once, and with everything I had left, I nodded. Because even lying broken in the dirt, surrounded by gunfire, I knew something for sure. We weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. Pain does strange things to your sense of time. It slows the seconds. stretches the space between heartbeats, turns every breath into a calculated decision. Inhale, hold, exhale, survive. I could feel Alvarez still working on me, his hands moving fast and sure, wrapping bandages, cinching pressure dressings, sliding a needle into my arm for fluids. My entire left side felt like it belonged to someone else. Dead weight. Cold. But my right hand still worked. I still had that. Somewhere beyond the ringing in my ears, I heard Singh's voice break through again. They're moving on our flank. Multiple fighters pushing east. We were getting boxed in. Dorsey didn't wait for orders. He repositioned behind a collapsed section of wall and started laying down suppressive fire with ruthless efficiency. Short bursts, controlled trigger discipline, making every round count. But I knew we were running out. Ammo check, someone shouted. Red on 5v6, Singh called back. Down to 2 mags, Dorsey yelled. Alvarez never stopped working on me, but I could see the set of his jaw tighten. We need to move him now, he muttered. I grabbed at his vest with my right hand, pulling him closer. Not yet, I rasped. My voice was barely audible, but the intent was there. We weren't leaving this alley until we'd cleared a path. A crackle came over the radio. Finally, our air assets. Alpha, this is Falcon 2, 30 Mike inbound, ETA 60 seconds. A minute? A lifetime. I shifted my head just enough to get a visual on the far end of the alley. I could see movement. Shadows darting along the walls. Taliban fighters shifting, preparing for another push. One of them stepped out, raising an RPG. I barely had the strength to lift my rifle, but muscle memory took over. One-handed, I squeezed the trigger, 2 rounds. He dropped before the launcher left his shoulder. Alvarez didn't flinch. Just said, "Attaboy." But then, the inevitable. The PKM that had hit me earlier opened up again. Rounds tore into the dirt inches from where Alvarez knelt. Another burst cracked the air above Singh's position. Then Dorsey's cover took a direct hit, chunks of brick and dust raining down on him. I could see it in their faces now, the edge, the calculation, the line between holding and breaking. We were seconds from being overrun. And that's when I made the call. "Push," I gasped. Dorsey didn't hesitate. Moving. With no cover left, he charged up the alley, firing, shifting, dropping low, firing again. Singh followed, swinging wide to flank the PKM's angle. Alvarez grabbed the strap on my plate carrier and dragged me with everything he had, scraping me across dirt and stone, ignoring the rounds snapping over his head. And then, like a door kicked off its hinges, the 30mm chain gun from the Apache opened up. The first burst obliterated the far corner of the alley. The second walked fire along the length of the compound walls, turning enemy positions into clouds of dust and smoke. I felt the concussion in my chest before I heard the sound. Then silence. A thick, impossible silence that settled over the alley like the world had hit pause. Dorsey called back over the net, voice hoarse but steady. "Left side clear. Right side clear." Alvarez dropped beside me, out of breath, sweat streaking through the dirt on his face. We've got to move him to the CCP now. They'll push again if we stay. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell them I could walk. But when I tried to sit up, darkness narrowed my vision, until there was nothing but the sound of Alvarez's voice and the thud of boots as my team lifted me onto a stretcher. We moved fast. Exfil wasn't guaranteed. The birds were inbound, but the LZ was still hot. As they carried me, I caught glimpses of my team through half-lidded eyes. Dorsey dragging extra mags from fallen fighters, Singh relaying target grids for another gun run, Alvarez never leaving my side. I'd always known they'd show up for me. But seeing it, feeling it, while half-broken and bleeding out in the middle of Tab Valley, that's something different. That's something you don't forget. We reached the CCP just as the next wave of enemy fire began. Even from the stretcher, I could hear Dorsey yelling for more suppression, Singh calling for smoke, and Alvarez leaning in close, whispering, "Stay awake, man. Don't you check out on me." And I didn't. Not then. Not there. Because quitting wasn't in our vocabulary. And leaving someone behind? That was never on the table. They got me to the casualty collection point, a small, mud-walled compound barely large enough to lay me down. The medic team was already there, working fast, cutting away my gear, checking pulses, packing more gauze into the wound on my back. I drifted in and out. Every few seconds, Alvarez slapped my face, just enough to piss me off, just enough to keep me here. Outside, I could hear the fight still raging. Dorsey shouting for ammo resupply. Singh relaying coordinates for another gun run. The radio crackled with updates from other positions, enemy movements, incoming fire, shifting flanks. But through all the noise, one voice cut through. The captain. He was back on comms, his voice scratchy but steady. "We've got birds inbound. Landing zone still hot. Get ready to move." The plan was risky, pushing out from the CCP, clearing just enough ground for the Black Hawks to land. We were low on ammo, exhausted, bleeding, but quitting wasn't an option. My team did what they always did. They fought like hell. They moved block by block, alley by alley, laying down suppression, tossing smoke grenades, dragging me along like dead weight when they had to. At one point, I caught a glimpse of Singh, one sleeve torn, bleeding from his forehead, still punching out coordinates like his life depended on it. Maybe it did. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes, we heard it. Rotor blades. The first bird hovered low, its miniguns chewing the far tree line to keep the enemy's heads down. Dorsey and Alvarez lifted me onto the stretcher again. I remember looking up at the sky, just a sliver of blue between the smoke and dust. They loaded me on. Alvarez gave me one last shove to secure me. "You're not dying on my watch," he muttered. The last thing I saw before the doors slammed shut was Dorsey giving me a tired grin and a half salute, covered in dirt, sweat, and someone else's blood. And then we lifted off, leaving Tab Valley behind us. Leaving pieces of ourselves there too. But we took everyone home. And that's the only part that mattered. Recovery wasn't fast. 17 surgeries. Months of rehab. Learning to lift my arm again. Learning to walk without dragging my leg like dead weight. Nights when I woke up drenched in sweat, hearing phantom gunfire in the back of my skull. Doctors told me I'd never deploy again. Told me the nerve damage in my back was permanent. That my shoulder would never regain full strength. They said the same thing after the first time I got shot. They were wrong then. They were wrong now. Less than 3 months after my final surgery, I stepped onto the tarmac with my team again, cleared for duty. Gear packed. Rifle zeroed. Orders in hand. I didn't come back to prove something to the doctors. I came back because that's what we do. Because the promise we make to the guy on your left and right isn't written in ink. It's written in blood and dirt and sleepless nights spent wondering if tomorrow will come. People ask me sometimes why. Why go back after nearly dying twice? Why put yourself in that position again? I don't give them long answers. Because the truth is simple. When you're the guy lying in the dirt, bleeding out, watching your team risk everything to pull you back, you realize that bravery isn't about medals. It's about choice. The choice to move forward when everything in you says stop. The choice to go back down the alley. To cross the threshold. To stand your ground when others hesitate. That's what stays with you. Long after the wounds heal. Long after the dust settles. Not the fear. Not the pain. But the faces of the men who wouldn't let you die alone. And the quiet truth you carry for the rest of your life. You do the same for them. Every damn time. If this story moved you, if it gave you a glimpse into the reality of sacrifice, loyalty, and what it truly means to stand for something bigger than yourself, do us a favor. Hit the like button. Share this video with someone who needs to remember what real courage looks like. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because here on this channel, we're not just telling war stories. We're preserving legacies. The quiet moments of bravery that never make the headlines. The decisions made in alleyways under fire. By people who don't need recognition, but deserve to be remembered. Drop a comment below and let us know. What does loyalty mean to you? Until next time, stay grounded, stay grateful, and never forget the ones who choose to go back when it would be easier to walk away.